This is TWiT.
So we've been talking a lot about the Huawei situation.
Mm-hmm. I've been wanting you to explain this to me more. What should I think of Huawei?
I have one, so I'm concerned.
So that's really the real question. You know, essentially at this point, Huawei is banned. Actually, U.S. companies are banned from doing business with Huawei. It started in 2012 when the Congress advised U.S. companies and the defense intelligence community advised companies, be careful about working with several Chinese companies. Huawei was one of them. ZTE was a Xiaomi. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And of course, the drumbeat got stronger a few months ago with 5G. We went around briefing our allies saying, really, you shouldn't use Huawei networking gear. And then it really turned up, the heat turned up last week when a number of U.S. companies were forbidden from doing business with Huawei, meaning Huawei couldn't get parts. Google complied by saying, okay, no more Android for you, no more updates. There was a 90-day kind of relenting, but it says temporary. Qualcomm said, okay, no more chips for you. Then ARM, a UK company, said, okay, you can't use our designs anymore. Huawei said, well, that's okay. We've been preparing for this. We knew this was going to happen. We saw what happened to ZTE. We've been stockpiling parts. They even were forbidden briefly from using SD cards in the phones. By the way, that changed for some reason.
Batteries.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Panasonic said no more batteries for you. Mm-hmm. So it got really serious. There's some concern, though, because, first of all, China has a nuclear option. They can respond. In fact, already, you know, J.P. Morgan said yesterday that because the Chinese people are very protective of Huawei, apparently, that their analysts said Apple should expect a severe depletion in sales of iPhones in China because the Chinese people will buy Huawei phones in defense of Huawei. And J.P. Morgan said probably your market in China will be cut in half, Apple.
That is 30% of Apple's iPhone.
So it's a big chunk.
30%.
And they would like it to be more.
Then I saw a story today that the Department of Homeland Security is warning that drones manufactured by Chinese companies, the DJI drone is probably the most popular drone in the world. I had one. Unfortunately, a lot of government agencies apparently are using them. The Interior Department tracked lava flows at Kilauea. Oil companies fly them over pipelines. Electric utilities use them to inspect transmission lines. DHS says those drones could be gathering information. Somebody a little smarter pointed out that, well, you don't really need the drones because the Chinese have satellites over all of this stuff anyway. Yeah. And I think this is part of the problem. The president muddied the waters considerably this week by at first saying, well, it's a big security problem, and then in the same sentence saying, but if we can fix our trade problems with China, all will be forgiven.
Right. Will include Huawei.
Is it a trade problem or is it a security problem? This is extremely unclear. I don't know what to say. We've yet to see I will say this. There's lots of evidence from a lot of sources going way back that Huawei has always been kind of, nasty and it's highly competitive. Years-long accusations of thefts, dubious ethics. Father Robert told us stories about Huawei executives wandering trade show floors with a camera, taking pictures of competitors' circuit boards. But that doesn't rise to the level of
I'll bet you
cyber
Intel
threat.
did that too.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, this is the real problem. Is that if you're going to pick one company out of China, you're going to have problems. You still have plenty. For instance, Huawei owns and has put in a considerable number of the sub-undersea cables. Mm-hmm. So a lot of data traffic goes through Huawei cables anyway.
Oh.
So there's not much
anything going into China is going to be.
Yeah, there's not much you can do. Well, no, these cables aren't just to China.
Elsewhere.
They're all over the world.
Everywhere. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of issues. This is a complicated issue. We've never been shown evidence that Huawei is engaged in espionage, but it is the case that the Chinese government has the right to tell Huawei what to do, whether they own Huawei or not. Huawei says a U.S. blacklist of Huawei will harm billions of consumers, including Americans. They had a press conference today to talk about this. Huawei is very upset about it, as you might expect.
I just want to know whether I'm going to get updates to my P20 Pro.
No. As of for the next 3 months.
Users were granted
3 months, but then you're out of luck.
90 days you will. For
next 3 months.
If this goes through, you will not. Google will not update.
A lot of P20 owners are selling their phones at a great discount on eBay, which is too bad because that and its successor were great phones. P30 is a great phone.
Yeah,
cameras are
Leo. Actually, if you're looking for a graduation gift, it's a great. There's some great deals on them right now. They will get security updates, but
so there's a Huawei PR guy who's come to me a couple times over the years, which is to say, I guess they're having no luck getting to real media, so they're down to me. And I mentioned this to you, I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I said, they want us to come to coverage of something. And you said, nah. And I said, yeah, you're right now.
But that's one of the things they're accused of is, and not only that, they would fly journalists all around the world.
Right.
Everybody does that.
So does everybody else.
I refuse it, of course, as a matter of ethics. But every company, I've had offers from every company to go to Taipei, to go to their factories, to go all over the place. And yes, we got offers from Huawei in the past, but
we've gotten offers from LG in the past.
Everybody,
and they're coming out with their own OS, right?
Well, so they could still use the open source version of Android. They just can't use Google services, but they don't. But they don't in China anyway. So they already have. In China, they have their own store. They have their own services, so they could easily roll those out worldwide. I think that says their own OS is rolling out later this year. These same restrictions pretty much put ZTE out of business last year. I don't think it bodes well for Huawei. But the real question, and I don't know what the answer is this part of a trade war? Is this even worse, maybe kind of anti-Chinese sentiment? Or is there a legitimate cause for concern?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Huawei does not seem like a very cuddly company.
No, there's a lot of reason to blame them. There's a lot of reason. Yeah. A lot of reason to blame them.
It feels like a trade war to me. There's been unless they're just keeping it all secret, there's been no conclusive evidence that Huawei has spied on anyone, as far as I can tell.
But we should point out there's a lot to be said for the fact that Huawei could and might be ordered to do so by the Chinese government. I think it's reasonable to say, try not to use 5G gear from Huawei, even though that's the #1 company and the best, most affordable choice.
Yeah, I agree on the
networking.
On the networking.
Yeah.
But the phones, keeping them from selling phones to Europe.
Right.
I mean, we don't buy phones from them anyways.
Right. They don't sell in America. They had planned to do that a year and a half ago, and they were cut off by the Commerce Department.
So are they evil empire or not?
I think I think that both are true. I think the administration is using Huawei as a poster child, and hopes that by bludgeoning Huawei, I mean, Trump basically said this, hoped that by bludgeoning Huawei they could force the Chinese government to make a trade deal.
Right.
He said
and
that.
if they get a deal, Huawei's back in.
Suddenly, they're fine.
Nevertheless, it's completely reasonable to be concerned about Huawei. The problem I have with that is it's reasonably concerned with any Chinese company. All of our stuff is made in China. There's not a lot of, I mean, the worst thing we could do at this point would be to cut off American companies selling to China and Chinese companies selling to us. To put up a big wall.
Like 80% of routers are Chinese made.
Yeah, I mean, we might have a bigger problem. I mean, and Ben Thompson pointed out China took the first shots in the trade war. It threw out a bunch of U.S. tech firms, so maybe it's time that we respond. I mean, look what companies have been thrown out of China, including Facebook, Twitter, Google, Flickr, SoundCloud, Snapchat. No, but that's the point. Is they've been doing this forever.
It's not just that they're thrown out. It's just it's made impossible for them to succeed.
Right. Yeah, you can't use WhatsApp
unless they agree to censorship.
Yeah.
Well, that's yeah.
But what if they just
can we
turn off
maybe
one of those
set up-
undersea cables?
Can we maybe
Then
set
what
up
happens?
some alternate people in India before we do this, though? Like, it's
I don't know what the answer is. I just know that this is messy
Yep.
and is unlikely to end. I think this will all end in tears. It's unlikely to end well. China may not have a lot of, and I'm sure the calculus in Washington is China does not have a lot of ways to respond to this except to buckle and give in. It's going to, it's going to cost us a lot of money in the United States. A lot of stuff's made in China. Apple cannot reasonably move iPhone manufacture back to the U.S. Maybe it can move it to Brazil. It already did so.
It has moved some stuff to India.
In India, because both India and Brazil have strong tariffs that prevent the sale of phones not made in those countries. So Foxconn has set up factories in both countries. Still a Chinese company making them. I don't know. This is a really complicated story, and I don't know if anybody knows. And whether you should continue to use DJI drones, I don't know. It's clear that the DHS is now extending the fight to other Chinese companies. And by the way,
So Matthew, how long have you had that phone?
It's about a year now.
When you bought it, did you have any? Was there a little voice in the back of your head that said, Huawei, China"?
Not really, no, because I don't do anything on the phone that I care about. I just wanted it for the cameras.
I asked Huawei about that, and the American representative of Huawei, the PR person who's based, I think, up in Seattle, said, the data is routed through Germany, not China. So don't worry about that. But on the other hand, when I set up my P20, the very first question was asked was, is it okay if we send information back to the home office? So they didn't even hide it. I mean, but every phone does.
Apple asked the same thing.
That was the P20.
Was that the phone that for location asked for your location?
Yes, it wanted to know what my location was, and is it okay to send it back to the Huawei?